growing up in a very Christian household and then going to a Christian college, I just, it was very much the norm to get married young, I think, because we also were so focused on purity.
Yeah.
So, you know, I like went through all of the typical like purity rhetoric when I was younger. When I was 13, my dad gave me like a promise ring where I like promised not to have sex until I was married. And I think because of that, for women and men, there was this pressure. Like if you were waiting, then you wanted to get married sooner, obviously, so that you could
and I know
do it.
I have some experience with that as well. And being in like a Baptist college, that was very much the norm. It was ring by spring.
Yep, ring by spring is very
How
much.
old were you when you got married?
22.
And how old was your husband?
He was 21. And I had just graduated college like earlier that year, and he was still in his senior year finishing up, which is crazy to think about a college student making that kind of life-changing decision.
A huge life-changing decision that ultimately didn't end up working because, as we know, when people get married young, sometimes it doesn't work out. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think there's lots of reasons. In my case, I don't think the marriage would have worked out regardless of like how old we were, just because there were some other serious issues that my partner had, which we can get into later. But I think personally that getting married when you're that young, especially when you're like either in college or just coming out of college, there is so much of the world that you haven't experienced yet. There's so much that you don't know about yourself. I mean, your frontal lobe isn't even fully developed.
Yeah.
So it's like those first few years out of college are so defining. You learn so much about who you are. You adapt to paying bills, like being in the real adult world, balancing a job and spending time with your friends, like figuring out what your interests are outside of school, figuring out who your community is. And when you start that out in a marriage, it adds on all these other complications as well, because adjusting to marriage is also a huge transition. So I just think for a lot of people diving into that, it's just too much to balance at once. And I think a lot of people find that they, along with their partners, change a lot.
Sure. It's like the ultimate thing that happens in your 20s. I mean, when you're 19 and then you're 30, you're an entirely different person. And even 19 to 25, like, the trajectory of your change is huge.
Yeah.
Do you think that as a woman, there was more pressure for you to get married than there was for the men around you?
Yeah, honestly, I think it kind of goes both ways, just depending on the situation that you're in. For me, there was definitely a lot of pressure to be pure. And so the pressure to get married was more just so that like I could remain pure up until I got married, which I already was not. I did not save myself for marriage. So I was definitely feeling like the guilt and shame of that and wanted to get married so that I could feel less guilty about the fact that I didn't wait to have sex. But I think from like my ex-husband's perspective, I think he probably equally felt a lot of pressure, especially because he was in school to kind of go into ministry. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pressure on pastors to be married when they go into a church. I think that like it's intimidating for like a young man to be single and like leading a church.
Sure.
So I think he probably felt a lot of pressure too, to kind of like move things along and have this like family dynamic that we could like enter into ministry into together with. Mm-hmm. But he didn't even end up going into ministry. But I think he felt that pressure while he was considering that as an option.
Understandably, because I don't think I've ever seen a pastor of a church that's single.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe that's just a stereotype or something, but I haven't personally seen it, so that could make sense.
There's something that feels weird about it, like the hot young pastor that's like that's available. I guess maybe some people would be into it, but
yeah. when it came to your divorce and kind of talking to your family and friends about that, being so young, what did that feel like?
It was scary. It was really, really scary. My family was super supportive of the decision to leave my husband. But even then, I mean, it took a little while to kind of get them on board. So the ultimate reason why I left my marriage was because my ex-husband was unfaithful to me. And when I first found out about it, I called my parents and I drove home in the middle of the night, and it was very dramatic. And I remember when I got there, even telling my parents that this had happened and that, I had left in the middle of the night because, my ex-husband was cheating on me and I was feeling so hurt by that. My parents' initial reaction was still to be like, okay, well, this is a marriage. This is really serious. You guys should maybe talk about it. Maybe you don't have the full story. Maybe we should talk to him. Let's see if there's a way that we can fix this. And I remember my dad even called him and was giving him all this advice of what he could do to try to fix this moving forward. Everybody was talking about therapy, and his family especially was urging me to remain a biblical wife and stay and support my husband because he was clearly struggling with these demons, and I was supposed to help him through this. So yeah, I think everybody's initial reaction was that we should work it out because that was the biblical thing to do. But very quickly, when my parents kind of realized how much was happening, and especially once the problem continued, which it did, they were very quick to tell me to leave. And
Sure.
so my family really supported me in that. My mom helped me through the entire divorce process and helped me fill out paperwork, went to the courthouse with me, all of those things. But pretty much everybody else did not feel the same way. So his family definitely was not happy with me. They felt like I was giving up. They even discouraged me from kind of telling people the truth about why we were divorcing because they were afraid it would make him look bad or hurt his chances of being active in the church moving forward. Definitely lots of other people, just everybody had an opinion. I lost pretty much all of my friends except for a couple of girls who knew the whole story. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
terrifying and sad and lonely going through that.
Yeah. And as somebody who's done it myself, I understand it's not easy, and it's almost harder as a woman in some sense to walk away because you're expected to stay and make things work and
Yeah.
prioritize your husband. What do you think, looking back from now till then, how long has it been since you've been divorced? And what do you think is the biggest takeaway you've learned about yourself and about dating?
So it's been 4 years. Yeah, it's been just about 4 years since the divorce was finalized. It's been 5 years since I left because it took about a year to get everything through the court system. And yeah, dating was hard. I feel especially because I didn't date that much before I got married, I was really overstimulated by the dating world once I went through my divorce, because I was with my ex-husband for 4 years, I think, in total. And before that, Tinder wasn't a thing. None of the dating apps were a thing when I had dated when I was younger. And pretty much everybody that I had dated, I had met through church or school or whatever. So I had no experience as what it would be like to put myself out there, and try out all of these new dating methods. And also on top of that, I have this looming elephant in the room that like I'm a divorcee, which just sounds so terrifying to tell people when you're going back out into the dating world.
Sure.
So yeah, that was really hard. And I was really freaked out by like meeting up with strangers on the internet for a while. I think I definitely dated a lot of people that like I met through friends of friends for a while. Yeah, and I think for a while I felt lost. Like I felt like I needed to be attached to somebody to have value, especially because that was something that had been so drilled into me as a woman that like my value was so attached to what I was able to give to my partners. So not having a partner felt really scary, and I felt like I had no identity.
And do you think when you were kind of looking for a new partner, were you prioritizing the idea of marriage again, or were you just looking to date, to be casual, to experience dating, to see what it's like outside of a Christian mindset?
Yeah, definitely more the latter. I left the church pretty much completely after I went through my divorce, and so I really did want to step away from that community for a little while, just so that I could figure out who I was outside of it. And yeah, I did just want to date. I definitely was not looking for marriage in the beginning because honestly, the thought of planning a wedding again sounded so traumatizing for a really long time. Like even now, I've been in like a 2.5 year like serious relationship, and I think I'll probably get married again one day. But even now, thinking about planning, I'm like, oh my god, like that sounds so like a lot.
It's a lot of work, and
Yeah.
when you do it once, you really don't want to do it again in like the span of a couple of years.
And you definitely don't want to do it the same way because it's like the first time I got married, I thought like, this is it. This is the best day of my life. And I like planned everything out, and it's was so detailed. I planned like, my dream wedding. I'm like, gosh, I guess that wasn't it because, that didn't work out. But yeah, I think the thought of planning that again sounds like a lot. But anyway, all that to say, yeah, I was definitely looking to date more casually in the beginning. And then, it really didn't last long. I would say after about like 6 months or so, I just kind of got over it, and I realized that I was just kind of searching to fill a void. And so then I started trying to spend more time getting to know myself and thinking about what I really wanted, which was a partner. But, I wanted a partner who would be equal to me, who would support me as much as I supported them, and who would care for me in the same way that I've cared for them, who wouldn't have like all these expectations of a role that I was supposed to fill. Yeah, and I think it took a while to find that, It's not
what
easy.
was like when you were dating and you were telling people I'm divorced, what was the reaction since you were so young at the time?
Yeah, I honestly didn't tell people a lot at first. Like when I would meet people on apps, especially, I would kind of wait a few dates to bring it up because it just felt so awkward.
That's fair. I did the same thing. And then if I did tell someone on the first date, it was really incredibly awkward.
Yeah.
And people were, you don't want to say that over a dating app. And so you wait to be in person, and then it's awkward in person. And then you're like, well, did I ruin my chance of dating this person? Because they think something is wrong with me, that I'm divorced at my age.
Yeah, or they're going to think like you're crazy. Yeah, because like most people that I was dating anyway were like not even thinking about marriage at all. And here I had already like done it. Yeah, it was super weird to bring up. If I did bring it up, I feel like I would always like try to play it off like a joke. like it'd be like, oh yeah, like I'm divorced, or I was previously married, but it's fine. Like it's really no big deal.
Yeah, using levity as a way to cope is definitely the way to go sometimes in those situations.
Exactly.
Do you think obviously it's been a long time and you're in a new partnership that's really good for you and successful and equally supportive. Do you feel like you've learned enough to give advice to somebody who's thinking about getting married at a young age?
Ooh, good question. Maybe it's always hard to say because, like, I definitely have advice that I would give, but I would always say that, like, if anybody's giving you advice about anything, take it with a grain of salt because we all still have so much to learn. And just because I'm happy and I have learned a lot and I'm in, a healthy partnership now doesn't mean that, I did everything perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I was talking to somebody now who is going to get married young, I would probably say, it's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be like, yeah, just wait, don't do it.
But you also know, and I know that when you're in the mindset of I'm doing this, there's not really any convincing you otherwise unless there's like a safety issue or somebody needs to be taken out of a relationship.
Yeah.
I think that people definitely are like set in their ways a little bit or think that they know because when you're 21 or 22 you feel like you know a lot, and obviously everyone has a lot of room to grow at that age.
Yeah, exactly. I think, ultimately people are going to do whatever they want to do. And if you're saying you're going to marry this person when you're like 21, 22, then, and that's what you need to do, then do it. But I would say never, this sounds really aggressive and harsh, but I think it's important that you never like take the option of divorce completely off the table. And that's something that I feel like a lot of people, especially in religious groups, do. Is they're like, divorce isn't an option. But it is. Like, marriage is sacred, it is valuable. Like, there's something that, is important about the symbolism of it. But ultimately, it is just a piece of paper. And what matters is your health, your safety. Mm-hmm. And if there's ever a reason why you should leave, then it's okay to leave. Like, there's nothing that should be forcing you to stay in a marriage where you're unhappy, where your mental health is suffering, where your partner is mistreating you or making you feel less than. Mm-hmm. I just think, I think it should always be an option, and it's okay. Like, you don't have to feel bad.
Yeah. I completely agree. I completely agree. And I think people don't consider it. They really don't. And I think then they're suffering for 5, 10, 15, 20 years in a marriage that truly doesn't serve them. And they could just make the decision to leave, even if it's hard. And it is hard and you have to do a lot of work on yourself, which you have.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give as well.
Yeah. And also, I think if divorce is an option, like if you and your partner agree that divorce is an option, and then something comes up and you choose to work through it and you choose to stay together, then you know that you're both there because you really want to be there.
Yeah.
And not because you're trapped in some legally binding marriage. That's not why you want to be married to somebody.
No, you want to be married to your best friend, someone you enjoy spending time with. And sometimes it takes being young and figuring this out to find the person that you're meant to be with.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to me. I think it's like something that a lot of people need to hear, especially in these religious communities. And in general, I think that people think that marriage is the end all be all of life and that's like the purpose of life. And we know that it's not. There's so much more to a woman's life than being a wife.